So it's gonna make sense when I tell you I got it off Facebook Marketplace out of the back of some dude's van who got it out of the basement of the Orlando International Harp Museum. A lot of weird dudes and harps in this story, actually, now that I think about it. That's probably fine. Are you here today because you want to repair your 1923 Model AA Wurlitzer pedal harp with carbon fiber? Well, you're in the right place. Well, a place at least. Now, if you've been around our channel old garbage, that doesn't surprise you. As you can see, it's got a little bit of battle damage from what it appears to be soda spilled all over it. Because I know when I'm playing the harp, I like to slam a 2-liter. Now, if you're new to the underground world of rap game / pedal harp repair, well, let me tell you right now, it's highly sexualized. Ooh, and a pretty decent ass crack. Yeah, that's normal, probably. And here's its upper ass crack, I guess. Also cool, super neat. And it's covered with the perfect amount of cigarette ashes and stickiness that the previous owner could be some sort of poster child for a mesothelioma commercial. Unfortunately, the neck's cracked. Why wouldn't it be? It can't do the one thing that harps have to do, which is make noise. So I decided to repair it in the most logical way possible. Carbon fiber. Now, the first thing I did when I got this instrument was slowly try to raise the tension on the old strings, knowing full well that they were 2 million years old and they were probably gonna fail. But as soon as I started bringing the tension up from just satin floppy, I started hearing cracking noises. Yeah, look at that. Harps are covered with a pretty thick layer of laminate, like thick enough to be the sides of a guitar, cello, violin thick. After using a dull chisel and getting underneath the laminate, well, you could see what was happening. This crack extends from the base of the neck all the way up to one of the tuning pegs. Harp necks are constructed with some solid boards, 5/16 inch thick, that are layered together to form a plywood. When you've got a cracked on the outside, the others are probably cracked too, you just can't see them. And what I've found is they'll actually crack on different layers in different spots, knowing that there's probably more damage back in there that we can't see. Since this area has so much tension in it, I'm also going to remove the laminate from the other side, and lo and behold, it had cracked all the way through. Cracks on this side don't line up with the other side, so I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes at the beginning and the end of this crack, and a little bit in the middle, just sprinkled in there. We're going to be using that as our injection ports to get some epoxy inside those cracks. Now, before you go all glue daddy on me and slam some epoxy into your crack, well, you gotta make some molds of the pieces that you're working with because you're gonna have to clamp this back together. One of the biggest issues I found with instrument repair is nothing's ever straight, because that would just make too much goddamn sense. So I like to make a pattern out of heavy cardstock and then transfer it to just basic 2x4s, 2x6s I have laying around. Now, I also glue foam onto these wood molds just to give it one more layer of protection. And if you're gonna have your foamy mold, well, anywhere near the epoxy could drip down it, go ahead and add a layer of packaging tape to it. That way, it'll help peel off. Inevitably, when you splooge all over things that don't need splooging on. Hide glue is really the only thing that should ever touch an instrument. It's an extremely hard glue, which is good for transferring vibrations, as well as if you want to ever take something apart and repair it, we'll give it a swift, apparently that's a hammer, and then the two pieces genuinely pop apart pretty well for service. The next glue that we're not going to be using, but we're going to talk about, is your standard run-of-the-mill, like tight bond wood glue. Okay, on the hardness scale it goes a little bit down, which is bad for vibrations, but issue with wood glue is if you're trying to also fill a gap, which we're going to have to fill some gaps in this area, it's not a good glue choice. That leaves epoxy. Now we're going to be using System 3's T88 structural adhesive epoxy. T88 is not only one of the strongest epoxies I've found on instruments, it also transmits sound the best because it's got a very high durometer rating. And then just like the rocket surgeon that I am, I went ahead and put it in a syringe with an 18 gauge needle. I'm then going to start injecting glue into the crack in any of those previously drilled holes that I made earlier. And then I clamped her together and just walked away for a couple days and forgot about it. And now, finally, we're going to start the first pressing or forging of carbon fiber. Now, it's not going to be the normal pattern weave that you'd expect it to be. Since we're going to be filling in a low spot or a valley, well, we're going to build it up with what I call kitty hair fiber. Now, I know what you're thinking of. Matt, it looks like a blind caveman chiseled this little valley out. Well, kind of That's intentional. You want as much surface area as possible for the carbon fiber and epoxy to really dig in there. And the easiest way to do that is just to mangle the heck out of the surface. I then added some masking tape around the perimeter of the repair to keep the epoxy dribblies at bay. Then I dug through my scrap carbon fiber bin, took a whole bunch of pieces and cut them even in tinier pieces. And then I put them in a bowl, and I did not emphasize enough the wear gloves. If you do this movement with carbon fiber without gloves on, your fingers will just die. You're not gonna, wear gloves. In the bodyworks world, they call this kitty hair, and it's usually just fiberglass strands mixed with Bondo. It's super strong stuff, but we're doing it for wood today, and we're going to press it or forge it into the surface. Totally forgot. If your repair area overlaps a spot that you need to protect some holes from getting filled in with carbon fiber or glue, well, use earplugs because they expand to fit the hole. And you can also shove more than one into the hole if it's too loose, or they're into that. We're starting off by applying a thin coat of TA8 epoxy, and we're making sure we get it in all those little cracks and crevices into the repair. Then I'm going to take my fun bowl filled with kitty carbon, start throwing it in there. But remember that too much epoxy mixed into your carbon fiber is just as bad as too little. Now I'm going to let our repair set up for at least an hour, possibly 4. What I'm waiting for is the epoxy to cure just enough that the carbon fiber would hold its shape on its own, but not cured enough that it's actually a solid block. You're basically looking for a super thick Play-Doh. Now as you slowly fill that valley up, you think you're going to want to start when it's level. Nay. Go a little overboard on your kitty carbon mountain. That way when you press it down, well, it'll not have to worry about an air gap or a bubble forming in between the layers of your braided carbon and your kitty carbon. I'm going to redo some of the masking to expose more of the wood and give it a drip edge so I can control where the epoxy oozes out at. I then added 10 layers of carbon fiber, 1 layer at a time. Now it's super important to rotate your pattern on your carbon fiber as you're cutting it out. That way your fiber is stronger in different directions. Now don't be worrying too much about the extra epoxy. The next step is a press. And once you got her clamped and the extra epoxy, just wiped away, well, you're done. But, well, with this part of the repair. Just let her chill for a day or two and cure. And then I repeated the exact same process on this side and the bottom side. Carbon fiber all the way around. I'm neglecting to do it on the top. Mainly because I'm lazy. Yeah, I think it'll be fine on just the 3 sides. I'm not too worried about it. Now on the driver's side of the harp, we're actually going to be installing a thin wood layer over the carbon fiber. The reason is if you ever have body filler on a car and you hit it with spray paint really fast, the spray paint absorbs into the body filler differently than on metal. The same thing can happen with the size or the glue that you use for gilding if it goes from epoxy to wood, aka wants to absorb in the wood, just kind of chills on top of the epoxy. So to avoid all that garbage, just going to throw some wood laminate on it, be done with it. But for the other side, we called our little friends at ULTICARBON. I was looking for a carbon fiber that had a forged look. Okay, looks amazing, but had gold mixed into it. Now the reason I'm using ULTICARBON for the cosmetic side is this is a stabilized carbon fiber. If I had just done that with a regular woven carbon fiber fabric, it would have frayed, you would have almost died. It would have been a bad time for all of us. Just look how amazing this stuff is to cut. Like, seriously. Let me cut regular carbon fiber for you, just so you get a good idea. Oh yeah, that's garbage. It's like pre-preg, but not fucking mess. But this one has gold mixed in it, and it's their Generation 2 stabilized. You can see that after a little bit of shaking, you do get some little stragglers that fall out. But this guy, Oh, we got 2, we got 3, okay. So this one is basically glued together before you even get it near the thing that you're trying to carbon fiber. This is really the only way if you're trying to get a good clean edge on a recessed or inset piece, just buy it. Don't stop the video. Look at it again. Oh yeah. Now for the cosmetic layer, we're not going to use T88 epoxy. It's got a little bit of an amber look to it, and I just want crystal clear. So I bought a cheap name brand off Amazon, and that'll do just fine. Now we're going to apply this in 2 pours. One layer, it's pretty much just to get this tacked down and wetted to the surface. Once it's cured a little bit, then we'll come back for a second layer, which will be the thick layer that actually gives it some depth. Now if you try to do this all at once, I found that the carbon fiber will raise to the surface, and you don't want that. Because again, you want a perfectly smooth surface that you can like see through like a deep clear coater, like a bar top table. And after a quick wet sanding and some StewMac guitar lacquer, which by the way, this is some of the nicest stuff I've ever used, already packaged in a can, this is what you're left with. The brass action plate was looking pretty tarnished and sad, and kind of crusty. Not really sure what's going on there. So I went ahead and hit it with some 400 grit sandpaper and recreational meth just to take the edge off of things, and that got it back to a bright brass finish. I then did my metal turning technique that I call Starry Night, because on stage or anytime you get metal and light, well, it just reflects insane in this really cool artsy pattern, and I just think it looks cool. And then I lacquered it to give it even more gloss and to keep it from tarnishing longer. And here it is with all the carbon fiber finished, the gilding done, polishing, and restrung.